From archaic translation by H. T. Francis. Source. Adapted from archaic translation by H. T. Francis. 531. Jataka number 531. Kusa Jataka. This realm, etc. This was a tale the master, while living at Jetavana monastery, told about a backsliding brother. The story runs that he was of noble birth and lived at Shravasti city, and on his heartily embracing the faith he adopted the ascetic life. Now one day as he was going his rounds for alms in Shravasti city, he met a fair lady and fell in love with her at first sight. Overcome by his passion he lived an unhappy life. And letting his nails and hair grow long and wearing dirty robes, he broken-hearted weakened away and became quite pale, with all his veins standing out on his body. And just as in the angel world, such as are destined to fall from their heavenly existence manifest 5 well-known signs. That is to say, their garlands wither, their robes soil, their bodies grow ill-favoured, perspiration pours from their armpits, and they no longer find pleasure in their angel home, so too in the case of worldly brethren, who fall from the faith, the same 5 signs are to be seen. The flowers of faith wither. The robes of righteousness soil. Through discontent and the effects of an evil name their persons grow ill-favoured. The sweat of corruption streams from them and they no longer delight in a life of solitude at the foot of forest trees. All these signs were to be found in him. So they brought him into the presence of the master, saying, "Holy sir, this fellow is discontented." The master asked if it were true, and on his confessing that it was, he said, "Brother, be not the slave of sin. This is a wicked woman. Overcome your passion for her, find happiness in the faith." Truly through falling in love with a woman, sages of old, mighty though they were, lost their power and came to misery and destruction. And so saying he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, in the Malla kingdom, in the royal city of Kusavatai, King Okaka ruled his kingdom righteously. Amongst his 16,000 wives the chief was Silavati, his queen wife. Now she had neither son nor daughter, and the men of the city and all his subjects assembled at the door of the palace, complaining that the realm would utterly perish. The king opened his window and said, "Under my rule no man works sin. For which reason do you rebuke me?" "True, sire," they answered, "no one works sin, but no son is born to you, to perpetuate the race. A stranger will seize upon the kingdom and destroy it. Therefore pray for a son who can rule your kingdom righteously." "In my desire for a son, what am I to do?" "First of all send out into the streets for a whole week a band of dancing women of low degree giving the actor religious sense, and if one of them shall give birth to a son, well and good. Otherwise send out a company of fairly good standing, and finally a band of the highest rank. Surely amongst so many one woman will be found of sufficient merit to bear a son." The king did as they asked him, and every 7th day he inquired of all such as had returned, after taking their fill of pleasure, whether any of them had conceived. And when they all answered, "No, sire," the king was now in despair and cried, "No son will be born to me." The men of the city again rebuked him as before. The king said, "Why do you rebuke me? At your asking companies of women were exposed in the streets, and no one of them has conceived. What now am I to do?" "Sire," they answered, "these women must be immoral and void of merit. They have not sufficient merit to conceive a son. But because they do not conceive, you are not to relax your efforts. The queen wife, Silavati, is a virtuous woman. Send her out into the streets. A son will be born to her." The king readily agreed, and proclaimed by beat of drum that on the 7th day from that time the people were to assemble and the king would expose Silavati, giving the act a religious character. And on the 7th day he had the queen magnificently dressed and carried down from the palace and exposed in the streets. By the power of her virtue the dwelling of Saka manifested signs of heat. Saka, considering what this might mean, found that the queen was anxious for a son and thought, "I must grant her a son," and, while wondering whether there was anyone in the angel world worthy to be her son, he saw the Bodhisattva. At this time, it is said, having passed through his existence in the heaven of the 33, he was longing to be born in a higher world. Saka, coming to the door of his living place, summoned him on, saying, "Sir, you are to go to the world of men, and to be conceived as the child of Okaka's chief wife." And then he gained the consent of another divine being and said, "And you too shall be her son," and that no man might make a breach in her virtue, Saka went disguised as an aged Brahmin to the door of the palace. The people, after washing and adorning themselves, each thinking to possess the queen, assembled at the royal entrance, but at the sight of Saka they laughed, asking him why he had come. Saka said, "Why blame me? If I am old in person, my passions are unabated, and I am come with the hope of carrying off Silavati with me, should I get her." And with these words, by his divine power he got in front of them all. And by reason of the virtue that was in him no man could stand before him, and as the queen stepped on from the palace, dressed in all her glory, he took her by the hand and made off with her. Then such as stood there abused him, saying, "Bad on him, an old Brahmin is gone off with a queen of exceptional beauty. He knows not what is becoming to him." The queen too thought, "An old man is carrying me off." And she was annoyed and angry, no disgusted. The king standing at the open window, looking to see who might carry off the queen, on seeing who it was highly displeased. Saka, escaping with her by the city gate, miraculously caused a house to appear close at hand, with its door open and a bundle of sticks laid out ready. "Is this your dwelling?" she asked. "Yes, lady, until now I have been alone. Now there are two of us. I will go my rounds and bring home some husked rice. Do you meanwhile lie down on this heap of sticks." And so saying, he gently stroked her with his hand, and causing her to thrill with the divine touch, he then and there laid her down, and at his touch she lost consciousness. Then by his supernatural power he transported her to the heaven of the 33 and set her down on a heavenly couch in a magnificent palace. On the 7th day waking up, she saw this splendour and knew that this was no Brahmin, but must be Saka himself. At this moment Saka was seated at the foot of a coral tree, surrounded by heavenly dancers. Rising from her couch, she approached and saluted the god and stood respectfully on one side. Then Saka said, "I give you a boon. Choose what it shall be. Then grant me, sire, a son. Not merely one, lady. I will grant you two. One of them shall be wise but ugly, the other shall be handsome but a fool. Which of them will you have first?" "The wise one," she answered. "Good," said he, and he presented her with a piece of kusa grass, a heavenly robe and sandalwood, the flower of the coral tree and a coconut lute. Then he transported her into the king's bedchamber and laid her down on the same couch with the king. And just touched her person with his thumb, and at that moment the Bodhisattva was conceived in her womb. And Saka straightway returned to his own dwelling. The wise queen knew that she had conceived. Then the king, on waking and seeing her, asked by whom she had been brought there. "By Saka, sire." "Why?" "With my own eyes I saw an aged Brahmin carry you off. Why do you try to deceive me?" "Believe me, sire, Saka took me with him to the angel world." "Lady, I do not believe you." Then she showed him the kusa grass which Saka had given her, saying, "Now believe me." The king thought, kusa grass is to be got anywhere, and still disbelieved her. Then she showed him her heavenly robes. On seeing these the king believed her and said, "Dear lady, granted that Saka carried you off, but are you with child?" "Yes, sire, I have conceived." The king was delighted and performed the ceremony due to a pregnant woman. In 10 months' time she gave birth to a son. Giving him no other name, they called him merely after the grass, Kusa. About the time that Prince Kusa could run alone, a second heavenly being was conceived. To him they gave the name of Jayapati. The boys were brought up with great state. The Bodhisattva was so wise that, without learning anything from his teacher, he by his own ability attained to proficiency in all liberal arts. So when he was 16 years old, the king being anxious to make over the kingdom to him, addressing the queen, said, "Lady, in making over the kingdom to your son, we would institute dramatic festivities, and in our lifetime we would see him established on the throne. If there is any king's daughter in all India you would like, on his bringing her here we will make her his queen wife. Sound him as to what king's daughter he affects." She readily agreed and sent a maidservant to report the matter to the prince and to ascertain his views. She went and told the prince the state of affairs. On hearing her the great being thought, "I am not well favoured. A lovely princess, even if she is brought here as my bride, on seeing me, will say, 'What have I to do with this ugly fellow?' and will run away, and we shall be put to shame. What have I to do with household life? I will support my parents as long as they live, and at their death I will renounce the world and become an ascetic." So he said, "What need have I of a kingdom or festivities? When my parents die, I will adopt the ascetic life." The maid returned and told the queen what he had said. The king was greatly distressed and after a few days again sent a message, but he still refused to listen to it. After thrice rejecting the proposal, on the fourth occasion he thought, "It is not fitting to be in complete opposition to one's parents. I will devise something." So he summoned the chief smith, and, giving him a quantity of gold, asked him to go and make a female image. When he was gone, he took more gold and himself fashioned it into the figure of a woman. Truly the purposes of Buddhas succeed. This figure was beautiful beyond the power of tongue to tell. Then the great being had it robed in linen and placed in the royal chamber. On seeing the image brought by the chief goldsmith, he found fault with it and said, "Go and fetch the figure placed in our royal chamber." The man went into the room, and on seeing it thought, "This surely must be some heavenly nymph, come to take her pleasure with the prince." And he left the room without having the courage to stretch on his hand towards it, and he said, "Sire, standing in your royal chamber is a noble daughter of the gods. I dare not approach her." "Friend," he said, "go and fetch the golden image," and being charged a second time he brought it. The prince ordered the image that the smith had wrought to be thrown into the golden chamber. And that which he himself had made he had adorned and placed in a chariot and sent it to his mother, saying, "When I find a woman like this, I will take her to wife." His mother summoned her counselors and addressed them, saying, "Friends, our son is possessed of great merit and is the gift of Sakka. He must find a princess worthy of him. Do you then have this figure placed in a covered carriage and traverse the length and breadth of India. And whatsoever king's daughter you see like this image, present it to that king and say, 'King Okaka will contract a marriage with your daughter. Then arrange a day for your return and come home.'" They said, "It is well," and took the image and set out with a vast group of attendants. And in their journeys, to whatever royal city they come, there at evening wheresoever the people gather together, after decorating out this image with robes, flowers and other adornments, they mount it upon a golden chariot and leave it on the road leading to the ghat, and themselves step back and stand on one side to listen to what all such as pass by had to say. The people on seeing it, not dreaming that it was a golden image, said, "This, though really only a woman, is very beautiful, like some divine nymph. Why in the world is she stationed here, and from where does she come? We have no one to compare with her in our city," and after thus praising her beauty, they went their ways. The counsellors said, "If there were any girl like it here, they would say, 'This is like so and so, the king's daughter,' or like so and so, the minister's daughter. Truly there is no such girl here." And they go off with it to some other city. So in their wanderings they reach the city of Sagala in the kingdom of Matta. Now the king of Matta had 7 daughters, of extraordinary beauty, like to nymphs of heaven. The eldest of them was called Pabhavati. From her person stream on rays of light, as it were of the newly risen sun. When it is dark in her chamber, measuring 4 arm lengths, there is no need of any lamp. The whole chamber is one blaze of light. Now she had a humpbacked nurse, who, when she had supplied Pabhavati with food, intending to wash her head, At evening going on to fetch water with 8 slave girls carrying each a water pot. On the way to the god caught sight of this image and, thinking it to be Phabhavati, exclaimed, "The ill-behaved girl, pretending she would have her head washed, sent us to fetch water, and, stealing a march upon us, is standing there in the road," and being in a rage she cried, "Bad, you are a disgrace to the family. There you stand, getting here before us. Should the king hear of it, he will be the death of us," and with these words she struck the image on the cheek, and a space as big as the palm of her hand was broken. Then discovering it was a golden image she burst out laughing, and going to the slave girls said, "See what I have done. Thinking it was my raised daughter, I struck it. What is this image worth in comparison with my child? I have only hurt my hand for my pains." Then the king's emissaries took hold of her and said, "What is this story you tell us, saying that your daughter is fairer than this image? I mean Phabhavati, the Mata king's daughter. This image is not worth a 16th fraction of her." Glad at heart, they looked for the entrance to the palace, and had themselves announced to the king, sending in word that King Okaka's emissaries were standing at his door. The king arose from his seat and, standing up, ordered them to be admitted. On entering they saluted the king and said, "Sire, our king inquires after your health," and meeting with a hospitable reception, when asked why they had come, they replied, "Our king has a son, the bold Prince Kusa. The king is anxious to make over his kingdom to him, and has sent us to ask you to give him your daughter Phabhavati in marriage and to accept as a present this golden figure," and with these words they offered him the image. He gladly agreed, thinking an alliance with so noble a king would be an auspicious one. Then the envoys said, "Sire, we cannot wait here. We will go and tell our king that we have secured the hand of the princess, and then he will come and fetch her." The king agreed to this, and having hospitably entertained them let them go. On their return they made their report to the king and queen. The king with a great group of attendants set out from Kusavatai and in course of time reached the city of Sagala. The Mata king came out to meet him, brought him into the city and paid him great honour. Queen Silavati, being a wise woman, thought, "What will be the issue of all this?" At the end of 1 or 2 days she said to the king, "We are anxious to see our daughter-in-law." He readily agreed and sent for his daughter. Phabhavati, magnificently dressed and surrounded by a band of her attendants, came and saluted her mother-in-law. On seeing her the queen at once thought, "This girl is very lovely and my son is ill-favoured. Should she see him, she will not stay a single day but will run away. I must devise some scheme." Addressing the Mata king she said, "My daughter-in-law is quite worthy of my son. However, we have an hereditary observance in our family. If she will abide by this custom, we will take her to be his bride." "What is this observance of yours?" "In our family a wife is not allowed to see her husband by daylight until she has conceived. If she will act up to this, we will take her." The king asked his daughter, "My dear, will you be able to act thus?" "Yes, dear father," she replied. Then King Okaka gave much gear to the Mata king and departed with her. And the Mata king sent his daughter with a vast group of attendants. Okaka, on reaching Kusavatai, gave orders for the city to be decorated, all prisoners to be released, and after ceremonial sprinkling his son as king and creating Phabhavati his chief wife, he proclaimed by beat of drum the rule of King Kusa. And all the kings throughout India who had daughters sent them to the court of King Kusa, and all who had sons, desiring friendship with him, sent their sons to be his pages. The Bodhisattva had a large company of dancers and ruled with great state. But he is not allowed to see Phabhavati by day, nor may she see him, but at night they have free access one to another. At that time there is an extraordinary effulgence from the person of Phabhavati, but the Bodhisattva leaves the royal chamber while it is still dark. After a few days he told his mother he longed to see Phabhavati by day. She refused his request, saying, "Let not this be your good pleasure, but wait until she has conceived." Again and again he pleaded her. So she said, "Well, go to the elephant stall and stand there disguised as an elephant keeper. I will bring her there, so that you may have your fill of gazing at her, but see that you do not make yourself known to her." He agreed to this and went to the elephant stall. The Queen Mother proclaimed an elephant festival and said to Phabhavati, "Come, we will go and see your lord's elephants." Taking her there, she pointed out this and that elephant by name. Then, as Phabhavati was walking behind his mother, the king struck her in the back with a lump of elephant dung. She was enraged and said, "I will get the king to cut your hand off," and by her words she annoyed the Queen Mother, who appeased her by rubbing her back. A second time the king was anxious to see her. And, disguised as a groom in the horse stable, just as before, he struck her with a piece of horse dirt, and then too when she was angry her mother-in-law appeased her. Again, one day Phabhavati told her mother-in-law she longed